The service hallway behind the ballroom smelled like bleach, cigarette smoke, and dying flowers. Funny how the richest people in Manhattan celebrated beneath crystal chandeliers, while the people cleaning up after them stood under flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed loud enough to make your head hurt. I carried the empty tray against my chest and kept walking even after the ballroom doors closed behind me. My hands were steady now. Too steady for someone who had just been humiliated in front of 300 people. Clara. I stopped at the sound of Mrs. Holloway's voice. The old housekeeper stood near the laundry carts with her arms crossed tightly over her navy uniform. At 68 years old, Eleanor Holloway had spent longer inside the Moretti estate than most people survived around powerful families. Silver streaks cut through her dark hair, and her sharp brown eyes missed absolutely nothing. "You should have cried," she said quietly. I gave a small shrug. Would it have changed anything? She studied me for a long moment before lowering her voice even further.
No.
But it would have looked more believable. That almost made me smile. Almost. Somewhere beyond the walls, the orchestra resumed playing. Elegant music floated faintly through the vents while servers rushed around us carrying silver trays and expensive desserts nobody would finish. Mrs. Holloway stepped closer. "You need to leave before midnight." "I know."
No, Clara.
Her eyes sharpened carefully. "I mean leave." The words settled heavily between us. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she slipped something small into my hand so quickly nobody passing by would notice. A silver keycard, black stripe.
No marquines.
"The basement elevator still works?" I asked softly. "For you, it always will." I looked down at the card resting against my palm. Cold metal. Familiar weight. 8 years ago, Vincent Moretti had handed me that exact card the night he changed my life forever. "You are smarter than my son," he told me back then while Manhattan rain crashed against the windows of his private office. "That will either save this empire one day or destroy it." At 16 years old, I thought he was exaggerating. Now I knew better. "Mrs. Holloway," I began quietly, "if tonight becomes messy, it already is." She reached up suddenly and fixed the collar of my Maid uniform like she used to when I was younger. Her expression softened for the first time all evening. He has his father's arrogance, but none of his instincts. My eyes drifted toward the ballroom doors. Somewhere on the other side of them, Adrian Moretti was probably pouring champagne for investors while the entire city bowed around him.
Calm.
Controlled. Untouchable. He still thought tonight was about spilled wine. "He did not recognize me," I whispered. Mrs. Holloway let out a quiet breath.
No.
"But Vincent would have." The hallway fell silent again except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Then somewhere upstairs, a grandfather clock struck 11. My pulse slowed instantly. Right on schedule. I slipped the keycard into my pocket and walked deeper into the service corridor alone. Past industrial kitchens. Past storage rooms. Past employees too exhausted to look up from their work. The deeper I went, the quieter the estate became until only the sound of my heels echoed against concrete floors. At the very end of the corridor sat a plain black elevator hidden behind shelves of cleaning supplies.
No cameras.
No security guards. No signs. Most people inside the Moretti mansion did not even know it existed. But Vincent Moretti had built it for emergencies. And tonight definitely qualified as one. I pressed the silver keycard against the scanner. Green light. Access granted. The elevator doors slid open silently. Inside, there was no button panel. Just a single fingerprint scanner glowing faint blue in the darkness. I stepped inside and placed my hand against the glass. The scanner paused for one long second before recognizing me. Then the elevator began descending beneath Manhattan while soft classical music played overhead like a cruel joke. I closed my eyes briefly as memories flooded back. Late nights studying encrypted financial systems beside Vincent. Learning how power really worked. Learning which men smiled while planning betrayal. Learning why empires never collapse from enemies outside, only from weakness within. The elevator stopped nearly 60 feet below the mansion. The doors opened slowly onto darkness and cold air. Then the underground lights flickered on one by one. Screens. Servers. Steel vaults. Billions of dollars hidden beneath Manhattan. And at the center of it all sat the chair Adrian Moretti believed belonged to him. Power does not collapse all at once. It cracks quietly first, like glass under pressure. I stood alone in the underground control room, while the servers hummed softly around me, and the glow from dozens of monitors painted silver light across the concrete walls. Above my head, nearly 60 feet higher, Manhattan still danced beneath chandeliers and champagne bubbles. Adrian Moretti was probably smiling for investors. Vanessa Sinclair was probably pretending she had already become queen of the city. And neither of them understood that the foundation beneath their world had already started shifting. I slipped off my Maid gloves slowly and placed them on the steel desk beside me. Funny how something so small could feel heavier than armor. 8 years pretending to be invisible. 8 years listening while powerful men underestimated me. 8 years inside the Moretti Empire, while Adrian never once thought to ask why his father trusted a maid with unrestricted access to private hallways, financial archives, and encrypted systems worth billions. Vincent Moretti used to say arrogance made rich men predictable. Tonight, his son was proving him right. One monitor flashed red suddenly. Unauthorized transfer detected. Another screen followed immediately after. Then another. I typed calmly across the keyboard while numbers moved faster than human eyes could process. Offshore accounts rerouted. Hidden shell corporations frozen. Warehouse manifests erased. Not stolen. Not destroyed.
Locked.
Every illegal branch of the empire had emergency protocols Vincent designed himself decades ago in case leadership ever became compromised. Adrian thought he inherited his father's throne. He never realized Vincent built a second throne underneath it, one only I could access. The system clock turned 11:47 p.m., right on time.
My
Phone vibrated softly against the desk. One message. Holloway, they're starting to notice. I leaned back slightly in the leather chair Vincent used during private strategy meetings. The same chair Adrian had spent years staring at like it was his birthright. Above me, alarms finally started ringing through the network. Small at first, then louder. One of the monitors switched automatically to security footage inside Moretti Tower. Men in expensive suits rushed through hallways with phones pressed against their ears. Panic always moved fast around powerful people because they were not used to feeling helpless. Adrian appeared on screen seconds later. Calm, outside. Furious underneath. I could tell by the way his jaw tightened. By the stillness in his shoulders. Why are federal accounts freezing our transfers? One of his executives demanded somewhere off camera. Who authorized these shutdowns? Another voice answered shakily. The authorization came from inside the family network. Adrian's eyes sharpened instantly.
Impossible.
I almost smiled hearing that word.
Impossible.
That was the problem with men like Adrian Moretti. They believed impossible only applied to other people. Another alarm exploded through the speakers overhead. Then another. Shipping routes compromised. Financial assets restricted. International contacts disconnecting one by one. Not because they feared the government. Because they feared instability. Loyalty inside empires only lasted while money kept moving. I watched Adrian step into the private conference room with 6 cape regimes close behind him. Older men. Dangerous men. Men who helped build the Moretti name long before Adrian inherited it. The room looked tense enough to crack. Somebody explain this now. Adrian ordered coldly. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Dominic Ricci, the oldest capo in the organization, slowly removed his glasses and cleaned them with perfect calm. 71 years old. White hair. Sharp eyes. The kind of man who survived because he understood when power shifted before everyone else did. Your father warned us this day might come, Dominic said quietly. Adrian's expression darkened. What are you talking about? Dominic looked directly at him. Vincent never trusted one heir with absolute control. Adrian slammed both hands against the conference table hard enough to shake the glasses. Speak clearly. Dominic did not flinch. The emergency systems were activated exactly the way Vincent designed them. A long pause filled the room. Then Adrian asked the question that finally mattered. Who has access? Dominic's face remained perfectly still. Only one person. Adrian waited. Somewhere in the distance, another alarm started screaming through Moretti Tower. Then Dominic finally spoke the words that changed everything. The maid. For the first time in years, Adrian Moretti looked afraid. Not the kind of fear ordinary people felt. Not panic. Not weakness. Something colder. More dangerous. The kind powerful men experienced when control slipped through their fingers and they realized too late they had no idea who was holding the knife behind their back. I watched him through the security monitors while Manhattan glittered outside the glass walls of the conference room behind him. The city still looked beautiful at midnight. Yellow taxi lights sliding through rain-soaked streets. Steam rising from subway grates. Skyscrapers glowing like monuments built for gods. Funny how entire empires could collapse while the rest of the world kept moving like nothing happened. Adrian stood at the head of the table, with one hand braced against polished black marble. His tie was gone now. The calm billionaire image from the gala had disappeared completely. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that a maid has access to my father's emergency protocols?" Nobody answered immediately. Dominic Ricci folded his hands carefully in front of him, while the younger capos avoided eye contact altogether. They were afraid of Adrian, but not as afraid as they were of the truth. "She was never just a maid," Dominic finally replied. Adrian laughed once under his breath. Sharp. Disbelieving. Enough with the riddles. He looked around the room. Find her. Shut down every exit from the estate. Freeze all internal transfers. I want Clara Bennett in front of me within the hour. You cannot. Freeze the system, Dominic said quietly. Adrian turned toward him instantly. Watch me.
No, Dominique corrected softly.
You truly cannot. Silence settled over the room again. Heavy this time. I leaned back slowly in Vincent's chair while the monitors reflected across the underground vault around me. Every file, every account, every secret, all connected to biometric locks Adrian could not override because Vincent designed the system before his son was old enough to understand what power actually cost. Adrian grabbed a tablet from the conference table and began typing rapidly himself. His jaw tightened harder with every passing second. Access denied. Again and again. Then suddenly he stopped moving altogether. Because he finally saw it. My name. Primary authority holder. Clara Bennett. Even from 60 feet underground, I could feel the shift in the air upstairs. One tiny crack forming inside Adrian's certainty. That is impossible, he whispered. Dominic's expression remained unreadable. Vincent prepared for every scenario. Adrian's eyes darkened. Including betrayal? Including weakness. The room went completely still after that. Adrian stared at the screen like it had personally insulted him. Then finally, very quietly, he asked the question he should have asked years ago. Who is she? Dominic looked toward the Manhattan skyline before answering. When Vincent Moretti survived the financial war in 2008, he disappeared for 3 months. Adrian frowned slightly. I know the story.
No, Dominique replied calmly.
You know the version told to newspapers. I closed my eyes briefly as old memories returned. Rain against car windows. A 15-year-old girl sitting silently inside the back seat of a black sedan with bruised knuckles and nowhere left to go. Vincent Moretti watching me carefully from across the leather interior while Manhattan lights blurred outside. You are angry, he told me that night. Good. Angry girls survive longer. Upstairs, Dominic continued speaking. Vincent found Clara after her father died working for one of our companies. He paid for her education himself, trained her privately, finance, languages, strategy, cybersecurity. He said she understood systems better than anyone he had ever met. Adrian looked genuinely stunned now. Why would my father hide someone like that inside the estate? Dominic held his gaze evenly. Because your father believed empires collapse when leaders stop listening to invisible people. Somewhere behind Adrian, another executive rushed into the conference room pale-faced and breathless. The Zerg accounts are gone, he announced quickly. Every backup channel just rerouted through internal authorization. Adrian's voice turned dangerously quiet. Where? The executive swallowed hard. To the underground network. Adrian froze completely, and for the first time all night, he finally understood where I was. His eyes lifted slowly toward the floor beneath his feet, as if he could somehow see through 60 feet of concrete and steal directly into the hidden world below him. Into Vincent's world. Into my world. Then Adrian Moretti spoke 4 words that changed everything between us forever. Bring me the elevator keys. There is something terrifying about watching powerful men realize they are no longer the most important people in the room. I could almost feel it through the concrete floor above me while the underground servers continued humming softly around the vault.
Calm. Controlled.
Unbothered. Machines did not panic when empires shifted. Only humans did. I stood slowly from Vincent Moretti's leather chair and walked toward the massive wall of monitors lining the underground command center. Rain streaked across the security cameras outside the estate while black luxury cars continued arriving for the gala upstairs, completely unaware that the foundation beneath them had already fractured. Manhattan looked beautiful during collapse. That was the dangerous thing about wealth. It always disguised disaster well. My reflection stared back at me through the dark glass screens. Blonde hair pinned neatly behind my head. Black Maid uniform still perfectly pressed despite the wine stain near the sleeve. Invisible. Harmless. Exactly the way Adrian preferred me. A soft electronic beep interrupted my thoughts. The underground elevator had been activated. So he finally found the courage to come downstairs himself. I glanced toward the steel doors across the room while old memories surfaced without permission. Adrian at 22 years old, standing beside his father inside this exact vault while Vincent explained offshore structures and international leverage.
Young.
Arrogant. Brilliant in some ways. Blind in others. Back then, Adrian barely looked at me except to ask for coffee during meetings.
I wondered if he remembered that now.
The elevator descended slowly. I could hear the faint mechanical hum echoing through the underground chamber before the steel doors finally opened. Adrian stepped out first wearing the same black tuxedo from the gala, except now his jacket hung open and tension sharpened every line of his face. 2 security men followed behind him instinctively before Adrian raised one hand without looking away from me. Wait outside. Neither man argued. The doors closed behind them, leaving only silence between us. Funny how much quieter the world became when powerful people lost their audience. Adrian stared at me across the underground vault for several long seconds.
Really stared this time.
Not through me. Not past me.
At me.
You have access to everything, he said finally. His voice remained calm, but exhaustion dragged beneath every word. Yes.
How?
I tilted my head slightly. That is your first question?
His jaw tightened.
Start talking, Clara. Hearing my name from him sounded strange after years of being treated like furniture. I turned away from the monitors and walked slowly toward the central control desk. Your father built emergency systems after the financial war, I explained quietly, in case the family leadership ever became unstable. Adrian laughed once without humor. And he trusted you with those systems? He trusted me to protect them. From what? I looked directly at him then. From ego. Silence hit the room hard enough to feel physical. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly as realization kept unfolding behind them piece by piece. Every overlooked conversation. Every late night, he ignored me carrying files through private hallways. Every moment Vincent quietly included me while excluding his own son. Who are you really? He asked. Such a simple question.
Such a dangerous one.
I reached into the desk drawer and removed an old photograph protected inside a leather folder. Vincent Moretti stood beside a younger version of me outside a private academy in Switzerland. I looked maybe 18. Nervous. Determined. Alive in ways I had forgotten. Adrian stared at the photograph in disbelief. He sent you there? For 4 years. Why would my father hide that from me? I almost smiled sadly. Because he knew exactly how you would react to a poor girl becoming smarter than you. Adrian looked away sharply after that. The truth hurt more when it arrived quietly. I walked closer slowly, heels echoing against polished concrete floors. You embarrassed me tonight because you thought power belonged to bloodlines and expensive suits, I said softly. Your father understood something you never did. Adrian's eyes lifted back to mine. And what is that? The people serving dinner usually hear more secrets than the people sitting at the table. Somewhere above us, thunder rolled across Manhattan. The underground lights flickered once before stabilizing again. Adrian glanced around the vault slowly now like he was seeing it for the first time. The servers, the encrypted ledgers, the international accounts connected directly through my authorization. His empire, except it was never fully his. You froze the network, he said quietly. No, I met his gaze evenly. I protected it. Another long silence stretched between us before Adrian stepped closer for the first time all night.
Not angry now.
Not cold either. Something far more dangerous. Curious. And if I try to take control back? He asked softly. I held his gaze without blinking. Then your father chose the wrong heir. The worst kind of silence is the one that comes after the truth finally lands. Adrian did not speak for several seconds after I told him his father might have chosen the wrong heir. He just stood there beneath the cold underground lights staring at me like he was trying to rebuild every memory he had ever had of me from scratch. Funny how quickly human beings panic when invisible people suddenly become impossible to ignore. Rain hammered somewhere above us, muffled by layers of steel and concrete. The underground servers continued glowing softly around the vault while billions of dollars moved through encrypted systems only I could fully control. Vincent designed this place like a second heartbeat beneath Manhattan.
Hidden.
Patient.
Alive.
Adrian walked slowly toward the main desk, his polished shoes echoing across the floor with controlled precision. He always moved like a man performing for an audience, even when nobody was watching. But tonight the performance had cracks in it. I could see them now, in the tightness around his eyes. In the way his breathing slowed whenever he looked at the authorization screens carrying my name instead of his. All these years, he said quietly, you were standing inside my home pretending to clean floors. I leaned lightly against the desk. And all these years, you never asked why your father trusted me more than your executives. His jaw flexed once. You manipulated him. That almost made me laugh. Almost.
No, Adrian.
I listened to him. The difference mattered more than he understood. Vincent Moretti used to spend hours talking late into the night after strategy meetings ended. Sometimes about business. Sometimes about war. Sometimes about loneliness. Powerful men only spoke honestly around people they believed beneath them. That was the irony of wealth. It blinded people to the ones carrying their secrets. Adrian looked away briefly toward the rows of servers lining the underground walls. My father built this empire from nothing.
No, I correcte sufli.
He built it from survival. His eyes snapped back to mine immediately. What is that supposed to mean? I hesitated for the first time all night, not because I feared him, because some truths changed people permanently once spoken aloud. Your father grew up hungry, I said quietly. Not poor.
Hungry.
There is a difference. Adrian frowned slightly. Vincent never talked publicly about his childhood. Most powerful men rewrote their beginnings into cleaner stories once money arrived. He told me once that starving children grow into dangerous adults because they never fully believe safety will last. I glanced around the underground vault slowly. That is why he prepared backups for everything. Backup accounts. Backup routes. Backup leadership. Adrian's expression darkened again. You mean you? I mean protection. The room fell quiet except for the low electronic hum surrounding us. Somewhere overhead, thunder rolled through Manhattan again. Adrian stepped closer until only a few feet separated us now. Close enough for me to notice exhaustion finally settling beneath his carefully controlled expression. He looked less like a billionaire tonight and more like a son discovering his father had never truly trusted him. Did he ever plan to tell me? He asked quietly. There it was. The real wound underneath all the anger. Not the money. Not the authority. The betrayal. I looked at him for a long moment before answering honestly. I think he hoped you would become the kind of man who noticed people before it was too late. Adrian lowered his gaze briefly after that. The words hit harder than accusation ever could. Then suddenly the monitors behind me flashed red again. Multiple alerts. International calls disconnecting. Warehouse routes compromised. One screen switched automatically to security footage outside Moretti Tower, where black SUVs had started gathering along the curb beneath the rain. Adrian turned immediately toward the screens. That is not our security detail. No, I said quietly. It is the Baron family. His expression sharpened instantly. The Baroness had spent years waiting for weakness inside the Moretti Empire. And tonight weakness smelled like blood in the water. One of the alerts blinked again. Internal leak detected. Adrian stared at the message for one long second before understanding settled across his face like ice. Someone inside my organization tipped them off. Yes. Who? I met his gaze evenly. The same people your father warned you about. Adrian looked back toward me slowly. And who did he warn me about? I held his eyes without blinking. The men who clap the loudest when you humiliate someone weaker than you. You can tell a man is losing control by how quiet he becomes. Adrian did not shout after I told him the Baron family already knew about the instability inside the empire. He did not slam tables or threaten anyone the way lesser men would have. He just stared at the security footage playing across the underground monitors while rain poured over Manhattan above us like the city itself was holding its breath. Black SUVs lined the street outside Moretti Tower now. Engines idling. Headlights glowing through the storm. Predators circling carefully before deciding where to bite first. How long do we have? Adrian asked quietly. I checked the encrypted movement reports flashing across one of the screens. Less than an hour before they make their move publicly. Adrian loosened his cuff slowly, eyes still fixed on the monitors. And internally, that already started. The truth settled heavily between us. Empires never collapsed from attacks outside. They collapsed because people inside stopped believing the throne was stable. Phones stopped getting answered. Loyal men started calculating safer futures. Fear spread faster than loyalty ever could. Adrian turned toward me fully again. You could have destroyed everything tonight. I still can. He held my gaze for a long moment after that. Strange how differently he looked at me now. Not like a maid. Not like furniture standing quietly in the corner. Like a threat. Like an equal. Maybe even like a mistake he regretted making too publicly. Another alert flashed across the monitors. Unauthorized access attempt. Warehouse 18. Adrian moved beside me instantly, while I typed rapidly across the keyboard. The underground vault glowed silver around us, while encrypted pathways shifted across the screens. What are they trying to access? He asked. Shipping records. Can you stop it? Already did. His eyes flicked toward me briefly. There was something unfamiliar in them now. Respect. The realization unsettled him more than the crisis itself. Adrian Moretti had spent years believing intelligence belonged to men who wore expensive suits and sat at polished tables. Tonight, the woman he publicly humiliated was the only reason his empire was still breathing. Somewhere above us, alarms echoed faintly through the building again. Then my phone buzzed sharply against the desk. One message from Mrs. Holloway. Vanessa is speaking to someone outside the family. Adrian noticed my expression immediately. What happened? I looked up slowly. Your fiancé is leaking information. His face hardened instantly.
No, Adrian.
Vanessa would never risk her position like that. I almost pitied him in that moment. Powerful men always struggled most with betrayal from people they considered beautiful. She already did, I said quietly. I turned one of the monitors toward him and activated audio from the service corridor upstairs. Static crackled briefly before Vanessa's voice filled the underground vault. Adrian has no idea what is happening, she whispered urgently. If the Baroness move now, the board will panic. Another male voice answered softly through the speaker. And the girl? Vanessa laughed once under her breath. Please. She was cleaning wine off marble floors 6 hours ago. Adrian went completely still beside me. Funny how humiliation sounds different when you are finally the one hearing it. The recording ended. Silence swallowed the room afterward except for the low hum of servers surrounding us. Adrian looked down briefly before exhaling slowly through his nose.
Not angry anymore. Worse.
disappointed. My father knew, he said quietly. About Vanessa. About the executives. About all of them. Yes. And he still left me in charge. I studied him carefully before answering.
No.
He left you a chance. Adrian looked at me sharply after that. To do what? Become better than the people clapping for your mistakes. The words landed hard enough to feel physical. Outside, thunder rolled again across Manhattan. One of the security feeds suddenly flickered before switching to the lobby upstairs. Men in dark coats were entering the building now.
Calm. Organized.
Smiling too easily. Barone representatives. The war was no longer waiting outside the doors. It had officially stepped inside. Adrian stared at the screen for one long second before speaking again. If we survive tonight, he said quietly, everything changes. I met his eyes evenly beneath the cold underground lights.
No, Adrian.
Another elevator alarm echoed softly through the vault. More people coming downstairs. More decisions arriving with them. Everything already did. People reveal who they truly are when power starts moving away from them. Some become cruel. Some become desperate. And some finally become honest. The underground elevator doors opened slowly, with a low mechanical sound that echoed across the vault like a warning. Adrian and I both turned toward the entrance while cold light spilled across the polished concrete floor. 3 men stepped out first. Dominic Ricci in his charcoal suit. 2 senior capos behind him. Older, watchful, careful. The kind of men who survived decades in dangerous businesses because they understood when loyalty needed to shift before everyone else noticed. Dominic looked between Adrian and me once before speaking quietly. The Baroness are demanding a meeting upstairs. Adrian crossed his arms immediately. Then let them wait. That would be unwise, Dominic replied calmly. Half the board already believes the family is unstable. I watched Adrian carefully as tension tightened through his shoulders again. He hated this. Not the crisis itself. The loss of certainty. Men like Adrian were raised to believe leadership meant never appearing vulnerable. But tonight vulnerability was hanging from him like rainwater. Dominic's eyes settled on me next. The others are asking for Clara. Adrian looked sharply toward him. For what? Dominic hesitated only briefly. Direction. Silence filled the underground vault instantly. Even the server hums suddenly felt louder. Adrian stared at Dominic like the words physically offended him. You are all seriously willing to hand authority to someone who is cleaning glasses upstairs tonight? One of the older capos finally spoke for the first time. No offense, Adrian, but she is the only reason the Baroness have not destroyed us already. Another added quietly. Vincent trusted her. Adrian looked away sharply after hearing his father's name again. I could almost see the war happening inside him now. Pride against reality. Ego against survival. Somewhere above us, thunder cracked across Manhattan loud enough to shake faint dust from the ceiling. Dominic stepped forward slowly. The boardroom is waiting. Adrian laughed once under his breath. Tired this time. Hollow. Of course it is. I turned toward the monitors instinctively, preparing to stay underground where the systems remained safest, but Dominic stopped me with a single sentence. They are not waiting for Adrian. The room went still again. Adrian closed his eyes briefly after hearing that. Just for a second. But it was enough for me to understand something important. He already knew. Deep down, Adrian understood the Empire trusted stability more than bloodlines tonight. And stability currently looked like me. 20 minutes later, the private boardroom above the gala felt colder than the underground vault ever had. The chandeliers still glowed gold overhead. Expensive whiskey still sat untouched beside crystal glasses. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Fear had entered the room now, and fear always ruined luxury. More than 20 executives, capos, and investors sat around the massive black marble table when Adrian and I entered together. Conversations stopped instantly. Every eye turned toward us.
Toward me.
Funny how quickly invisible women become visible once money starts depending on them. Vanessa Sinclair stood near the far side of the room, wearing the same silver dress stained with wine from earlier. Her expression hardened immediately when she saw me beside Adrian instead of behind him. What is she doing here? She demanded sharply. Nobody answered her. That seemed to unsettle her even more. Adrian walked slowly toward the head of the table, where Vincent Moretti's chair remained empty beneath the chandelier lights. For years nobody else had dared sit there. Not even Adrian. The room watched him carefully now, waiting, measuring, deciding. Then Adrian did something none of them expected. He stopped beside the chair and looked directly at me instead. My pulse slowed instantly. Sit down, Clara. The entire boardroom froze. Vanessa actually laughed in disbelief. Adrian, this is insane. But Adrian never looked away from
Me.
his voice remained low.
Come.
Certain in a completely different way now. You protected this empire tonight while the rest of us protected our pride. The room stayed perfectly silent. I stepped closer slowly while dozens of powerful men watched every movement I made. Adrian moved aside from the chair without hesitation.
Not forced.
Not humiliated. Choosing. And somehow that made the moment even heavier. I looked at Vincent Moretti's empty seat beneath the gold chandelier light while rain battered the skyscraper windows behind us. Then finally, very quietly, Adrian Moretti said the words nobody in that room would ever forget. My father was right about you. The room changed the moment I sat in Vincent Moretti's chair. It was subtle at first. A shift in posture. A silence stretching half a second too long. But powerful people notice gravity when it moves away from them. And in that boardroom high above Manhattan, gravity no longer belonged to Adrian Moretti. Rain crashed against the skyscraper windows while the city glowed gold beneath the storm. Thunder rolled somewhere over the Hudson River. The gala music downstairs had finally stopped completely. Nobody was pretending tonight was normal anymore. I rested my hands lightly against the black marble table and looked around the room slowly. Executives, investors, capo regimes, men who spent decades believing power only wore expensive watches and carried the last names they respected. Funny how uncomfortable they looked now being forced to take orders from a woman they ignored while she cleaned their glasses. Vanessa Sinclair stepped forward first, her voice sharp enough to cut through the silence. This is ridiculous. Nobody answered her. That frightened her more than anything else could have. Adrian, she continued, looking directly at him now, say something. Adrian stood beside the chair instead of behind it. That mattered. Everyone in the room understood it mattered. He looked exhausted beneath the chandelier lights. Not physically, emotionally, like someone finally seeing himself clearly for the first time in years. Enough, Vanessa, he said quietly. Her face tightened immediately. You cannot seriously trust her over your own people. I almost pitied her then. People like Vanessa never understood the difference between attention and loyalty. Adrian looked toward the rain-covered windows briefly before answering. My own people are the reason this empire nearly collapsed tonight. Silence swallowed the room again after that. Dominic Ricci slowly leaned back in his chair with something dangerously close to approval in his old eyes. The older Kapos watched Adrian carefully now, measuring him differently than before. Because real leadership was not about refusing to lose power. It was about recognizing who could save everyone before pride destroyed them all. I activated one of the monitors built into the marble table. Financial reports appeared instantly across the screens surrounding the room. Offshore routes stabilized. Internal accounts secured. The Baronne infiltration blocked completely. Several executives visibly relaxed for the first time all night. The emergency protocols are now contained, I explained calmly. No external agency has enough evidence to move publicly against the family. One investor cleared his throat nervously. And the Baroness? They lose leverage the second they realize we are united again. Vanessa laughed bitterly under her breath. United? Her eyes moved toward me with open disgust. She was literally serving drinks 6 hours ago. This time Adrian answered before I could. And 6 hours ago, she was still protecting people who never deserved it. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief, while the room remained completely silent around us. Adrian stepped closer to the table slowly, his voice lower now. Honest in a way I had never heard before. Do you know what my father once told me? Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. He said weak men humiliate people when they feel threatened because cruelty is easier than self-awareness. Adrian looked directly at me then. Tonight, I proved him right. Something tightened painfully in my chest hearing that. Not because of the apology itself. Because Adrian Moretti was not a man raised to admit fault publicly. Men like him were taught to protect pride at all costs. Yet here he stood beneath gold chandeliers in front of the most dangerous people in New York, choosing humility instead. Dominic finally spoke quietly from the far side of the table. Then what happens now? Adrian never looked away from me when he answered. Now we follow the person who actually kept this family standing. The room remained still for one long breath before the older capos slowly nodded one by one. Not forced. Choosing. Acceptance spread quietly through the boardroom after that, like the storm outside had finally broken open. I looked around at the empire Vincent spent his life building. The empire Adrian almost lost. The empire now waiting for my decisions. Funny how quickly the world changes when invisible women stop staying invisible. Outside the skyscraper windows, Manhattan shimmered beneath the rain while thunder rolled across the skyline one final time. And standing beside Vincent Moretti's chair, Adrian looked at me not like a maid, not like a threat, but like the only person in the room he finally trusted completely. Then, very softly, almost like a confession meant only for me, he said, "You were never beneath me, Clara. I was just too blind to see you standing above everyone else." The strangest part about becoming powerful is realizing how lonely powerful people really are. By 2:30 in the morning, the gala guests were gone. The investors had stopped pretending to celebrate. Even the city outside seemed quieter beneath the rain. Manhattan glittered cold and silver through the massive windows of Moretti Tower, while exhausted employees cleaned abandoned champagne glasses from marble tables downstairs. The empire survived the night. Barely. But survival always came with consequences. I stood alone in Vincent Moretti's office on the top floor watching storm clouds drift between skyscrapers while the city lights reflected against the glass. The room still smelled faintly like cigars and old leather even though Vincent had been dead almost 2 years. Funny how some people leave echoes behind stronger than memories. His office looked exactly the same as the last time I saw him alive. Dark wood shelves. Crystal. Decanters untouched beside the fireplace. The massive black desk facing Manhattan like the city itself answered to him. Maybe once it did. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts. Before I could answer, the office door opened slowly, and Adrian stepped inside. No security.
No executives.
No performance. Just him. He had changed clothes sometime during the chaos downstairs. Black dress shirt now. Sleeves rolled slightly above his wrists. Exhaustion shadowed his face beneath the low office lighting, but something else had changed too. The sharp arrogance from earlier was gone, stripped away somewhere between the underground vault and the boardroom. "You are still here," he said quietly. I looked back toward the rain-covered skyline. "So are you." The door clicked shut behind him. Silence settled between us again, softer this time, less dangerous. Adrian walked slowly deeper into the office before stopping beside the fireplace. "Dominic told me you have not slept in almost 20 hours. I almost smiled faintly. That sounds like something Dominic would monitor. Adrian studied me carefully across the room. "You should rest. You should learn not to give orders to the person controlling your financial systems." That actually made him laugh quietly for the first time all night. The sound surprised both of us. It changed his entire face when he smiled without cruelty behind it. Less untouchable. More human. Dangerous in a completely different way. "Fair point," he admitted softly. Rain tapped gently against the windows while thunder faded farther into the distance now. The storm was finally moving away from the city. Adrian glanced around his father's office slowly before speaking again. He loved this room. Because it reminded him he survived. Adrian looked toward me. "You knew him better than I did." The sadness in his voice hit harder than anger ever could have. I hesitated briefly before answering honestly.
No.
I just listened when he was tired enough to tell the truth. Adrian lowered his eyes for a second after that. And what truth did he never tell me? I studied him carefully beneath the dim office lights. This version of Adrian felt unfamiliar, quieter, like the weight of tonight finally cracked something open inside him that money could not fix again. He was afraid of what power would turn you into, I said gently. Adrian nodded, once like he already knew. And was he right? The question lingered heavily between us. Outside, the rain slowed to a soft shimmer across the Manhattan skyline. I thought about the ballroom earlier, about humiliation disguised as authority, about the man who treated invisible people like they existed only to serve him. Then I thought about the boardroom, about Adrian stepping aside from Vincent's chair willingly, about him choosing humility when everyone expected dominance. Partly, I answered quietly. Adrian accepted that without argument, maybe because deep down he agreed. He walked closer slowly, until only a few feet separated us near the windows overlooking the city. When I saw you downstairs tonight, he admitted softly, sitting in my father's chair, it was the first time in years I realized how blind I have been. I looked up at him carefully. Power makes blindness comfortable. And you, he asked quietly, what made you stay all these years pretending to be invisible? That answer hurt more than I expected. I looked away toward the city lights below us before speaking. Because your father believed this empire could become something better one day. Adrian's voice lowered even further after that. And, do you still believe that? Silence stretched softly between us while New York shimmered beneath the fading storm. Then finally, for the first time all night, I answered him with complete honesty. I do not know yet. Adrian held my gaze steadily after that. No arrogance left. No performance. Just quiet determination settling slowly into place. Then he spoke the words that changed the air between us completely. Then let me prove it to you. By sunrise, the city already knew something had changed inside the Moretti Empire. Wealthy people always sensed instability the way animals sense storms before rain arrived. The newspapers had not printed anything yet.
No headlines. No scandals.
But phones were ringing earlier than usual across Manhattan. Investors were suddenly
polite.
Rival families were suddenly cautious. And every powerful man connected to the Moretti name had spent the night asking the same question in different ways. Who was Clara Bennett? I stood alone on the balcony outside Vincent Moretti's office, watching pale morning light spread slowly across the skyline. New York looked softer at dawn, less cruel somehow. Steam drifted between buildings while yellow cabs moved through wet streets below like tiny sparks against gray pavement. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the city washed clean and exhausted. I understood the feeling. My maid uniform was gone now. Someone from housekeeping had quietly delivered fresh clothes to the office sometime before sunrise. Black trousers, cream silk blouse, tailored coat hanging against a chair behind me. Expensive, elegant. Not mine. Adrian's doing, obviously. Funny how quickly people start dressing you differently once they decide you matter. The balcony door slid open softly behind me. You have not slept. Adrian's voice carried that same quiet roughness from earlier, but something warmer sat beneath it now. Less command. More concern. I turned slightly to find him standing in the doorway holding 2 coffee cups. His dark hair looked slightly damp from the shower he probably took downstairs. The black dress shirt from earlier had been replaced with a charcoal sweater rolled neatly at the sleeves. Simpler than usual. Human. Dangerous in ways tailored suits never managed to be. He stepped onto the balcony beside me and handed me one of the cups carefully. You remembered, I said softly after tasting it.
No sugar.
Adrian leaned against the railing beside me, eyes drifting toward the skyline. You have made my coffee every morning for 6 years. A strange ache moved through my chest hearing that. Because he was right. Every morning at 7:15 exactly. Black coffee.
No cinnamon.
1 espresso shot on difficult days. Invisible routines become intimate when repeated long enough. Adrian stared quietly at the city below us before speaking again. Dominic says half the board expects you to officially take control. I wrapped both hands around the warm cup. And the other half. They are terrified of you. That almost made me laugh softly. Good. Adrian looked at me then. Really looked. Not with suspicion anymore. Not with arrogance. Like he was still trying to understand how the woman serving wine yesterday morning became the center of his entire world overnight. "You do not seem surprised by any of this," he said quietly. "Vincent prepared me for worse." "Did he prepare you for me?" The question caught me off guard enough that I looked away toward the skyline again. Morning sunlight slid slowly across the glass towers surrounding us while the city woke beneath the fading storm clouds. "No," I admitted honestly. Adrian stayed silent after that. The dangerous thing about quiet men is that they make you hear your own heartbeat too clearly. "Clara," he said softly after a moment, "why did you really stay?" I frowned slightly. "I already told you." "No," his voice lowered. "You told me why you stayed for my father. I am asking why you stayed after he died." The truth hit harder than I expected, because I had asked myself that same question 100 times over the past 2 years. I could have left,
Taken the offshore accounts.
disappeared anywhere in the world Vincent prepared for me. Instead, I stayed inside Moretti Tower pretending to be invisible while Adrian slowly became colder, lonelier, more arrogant under the weight of inheriting an empire he never fully understood. "Part of me hoped you would change," I whispered finally. Adrian looked down briefly after hearing that.
And did I?
I studied him quietly beneath the pale morning light. The man standing beside me now looked nothing like the one who humiliated me in the ballroom yesterday evening. Pride stripped away. Ego cracked open. Honest for the first time since I met him. "You are trying to," I answered softly. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly, like the words mattered more than he wanted them to. Then suddenly his phone began vibrating sharply inside his pocket. One glance at the screen changed his entire expression instantly. Calm disappeared. Tension returned. He answered immediately. "What happened?" Silence. Then Adrian looked toward me slowly while color drained from his face. "No," he said quietly into the phone. "Lock the building down." My pulse slowed instantly. "Adrian." He ended the call and met my eyes directly. Someone broke into the underground vault. The elevator ride down to the underground vault felt longer than it had the night before. Maybe because everything was different now. 24 hours ago, Adrian Moretti barely noticed when I entered a room. Now he stood beside me inside the private elevator watching the security feed with eyes sharp enough to cut through steel. The monitor above us flickered between camera angles from the underground level. Hallways, server rooms, vault doors. Security guards moving quickly through concrete corridors beneath Moretti Tower. Nobody spoke during the descent. The silence felt too heavy for conversation. My pulse stayed calm despite the tension tightening around us. Fear clouds judgment. Vincent taught me that years ago while teaching me how to survive rooms filled with dangerous people pretending to smile. "Never panic first," he used to say. "The first person who panics loses control of the room." The elevator doors opened onto controlled chaos. Men in black suits moved rapidly across the underground level speaking into radios while security monitors flashed warning alerts across the walls. Dominic Ricci stood near the central server room with 2 guards beside him. His expression darkened slightly the moment he saw us. "The breach lasted 4 minutes," he explained immediately. "No forced entry." My stomach tightened instantly. No forced entry meant internal access. Someone authorized. Someone trusted. Adrian looked toward the security footage playing across the nearest monitor. "Show me." Dominic activated the recording silently. Grainy black and white footage filled the screen. A hooded figure moved through the underground corridor at 3:17 in the morning using private clearance access.
Calm.
Precise. Familiar with the layout. My eyes narrowed slightly. "Stop." Dominic paused the footage immediately. I stepped closer to the monitor while cold dread slid slowly down my spine. The figure lifted one hand briefly while entering the server corridor. A silver bracelet flashed beneath the security lights for less than a second. My breathing slowed. I recognized it instantly. Vanessa Sinclair. Adrian must have recognized it too, because the air beside me changed completely. Colder.
Sharper.
"She does not have clearance for this level," he said quietly. "Someone gave it to her," I answered. Dominic looked between us carefully. "Nothing appears stolen." "Not yet," I whispered. I moved quickly toward the central terminal and typed into the encrypted system while Adrian stood directly behind me, close enough for me to feel the tension radiating from him. The servers hummed softly around us, while lines of encrypted activity scrolled rapidly across the screens. Then suddenly one hidden transfer route blinked red. Unauthorized duplication detected. Adrian leaned closer immediately. What is that? I stared at the screen as realization settled heavily inside my chest. She copied the succession files. Silence crashed through the room. Dominic's face hardened instantly. Adrian looked at me sharply. Explain. I hesitated only briefly before opening the encrypted folder Vincent protected for years. A single document appeared across the monitors surrounding the vault. Last will and succession authority. Vincent Moretti's digital signature glowed beneath the legal authorization seal. Adrian read the first lines silently before all color drained slowly from his face. Dominic removed his glasses quietly beside us. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because there it was in undeniable black letters across the screen. In the event of organizational instability, operational control of the Moretti financial network transfers immediately to Clara Bennett. Not Adrian.
Me.
Adrian stared at the document like it physically hurt to read. My father officially named you successor. Yes. And Vanessa stole proof of it. Yes. The underground room fell silent, except for the low hum of machines surrounding us. Then Adrian laughed softly under his breath.
Not angry.
Not bitter. Just exhausted by the irony of it all. She is going to sell this to the Baroness.
No. Y correcta quietly.
Adrian looked toward me. Then what is she doing? I closed the encrypted file slowly, while a terrible understanding settled into place piece by piece. She is going to release it publicly. Dominic frowned deeply. Why would she do that? I looked toward the glowing monitors around us. Toward the empire Vincent spent decades protecting. Toward the truth powerful men feared most. Because if the city learns a Maid inherited the Moretti empire over Vincent's own son, I said softly, the family will look weak enough for everyone to attack at once. Adrian stayed silent for one long moment after that. Then finally, he asked the only question that mattered now. Can we stop her? I looked directly at him beneath the cold underground lights, while alarms flickered softly across the servers around us. Only if we stop hiding who I really am. The press conference started at noon sharp. By then the entire city already smelled blood in the water. Black cars lined the streets outside Moretti Tower, while reporters crowded behind security barriers beneath gray Manhattan skies. Cameras pointed toward the skyscraper entrance, like weapons waiting to fire. News helicopters circled overhead. Financial blogs were already spreading rumors about internal collapse inside the Moretti empire. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, Vanessa Sinclair thought she had already won. I stood inside the private elevator watching the floors rise one by one while Dominic adjusted his cufflinks, silently beside me. Adrian stood across from us wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, his expression unreadable beneath the cold overhead lights. He had barely spoken during the past 2 hours. Not because he was angry, because he was thinking. Vincent once told me the most dangerous version of Adrian was the one who finally stopped reacting emotionally. The elevator reached the lobby level with a soft mechanical sound. The doors opened directly into controlled chaos. Reporters shouting questions. Security teams moving quickly. Flashing camera lights reflecting off marble floors. The moment Adrian stepped forward, the entire room erupted louder. Mr. Moretti, is it true your financial network was compromised? Who is Clara Bennett?
Did
Vincent Moretti leave the empire to a maid? Adrian did not answer immediately. He walked calmly toward the podium while cameras flashed nonstop around him. Then, unexpectedly, he stopped walking, turned slightly, and held one hand out toward me. The entire lobby fell strangely quieter after that. Not silent, but confused, curious, watching. I stared at his hand for one brief second before stepping forward beside him. The cameras exploded brighter instantly. Adrian guided me toward the center podium without touching me again once we reached it. Respect. Intentional distance. Trust. People notice details like that when power shifts publicly. Vanessa stood near the back of the lobby beside several investors, her silver sunglasses unable to fully hide the panic finally appearing beneath her carefully controlled expression.
Good.
Adrian stepped toward the microphone first. The entire room waited. For years, he said calmly, people inside this city underestimated Clara Bennett because they were too arrogant to look past her job title. The camera shutters snapped rapidly across the lobby, including me. The honesty in his voice stunned the room into complete silence. Adrian glanced toward me briefly before continuing. Last night, when my organization faced its largest internal threat in decades, Clara protected this company, this family, and every employee connected to it. Reporters exchanged stunned looks immediately. Somewhere behind the cameras, I saw Dominic quietly smiling to himself. Adrian continued speaking without hesitation. My father, Vincent Moretti, trusted Clara because he believed leadership should belong to the person most capable of protecting others, not simply the person born into power. Vanessa stepped forward suddenly from the crowd. This is insane, she snapped loudly. Every camera in the lobby turned toward her instantly. You are handing your empire to someone who spent years cleaning your floors. Adrian looked at her calmly.
Coldly.
But no cruelty remained in it anymore. No, he said quietly. I spent years failing to recognize the person already carrying it. The silence afterward felt enormous, heavy enough to change lives. I looked out across the crowd of reporters and executives while flashbulbs reflected against the marble walls around us.
Fear.
Curiosity. Respect. Confusion. Every powerful person in Manhattan was going to spend the next week rewriting everything they thought they understood about the Moretti Empire. Adrian stepped away from the microphone slowly, before looking toward me one final time in front of the entire city. You once told me powerful people become blind when they stop seeing invisible people, he said softly enough for the room to quiet again. I held his gaze steadily beneath the flashing lights. Adrian smiled faintly then. Real this time. Tired.
Honest. Human.
Thank you for forcing me to finally open my eyes. Something tightened painfully inside my chest hearing that, because this was no longer about revenge. Somewhere between humiliation and collapse, Adrian Moretti had become someone entirely different than the man standing in that ballroom the night before. Outside the skyscraper windows, Manhattan stretched endlessly beneath silver afternoon clouds while reporters shouted questions loud enough to shake the lobby walls. But for one strange moment, none of it mattered. Not the cameras, not the empire, not the city watching us. Only the quiet understanding passing between two people who had finally seen each other clearly for the first time. And standing beside me in front of the entire world, Adrian Moretti looked less like a king protecting his throne and more like a man finally learning that real power was never about who stands above others. It was about who remains beside you after seeing the worst parts of yourself.